All right, so Bank of America, they've been in the news
Yeah.
a bit lately, right?
Yeah.
Saying that they might close some accounts.
Right.
And I think anytime you hear anything like that as a customer, you're
Sure.
always like, "Whoa,
Yeah, of course.
hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Like what's going on here?"
Definitely makes you pay attention.
So what is it that Bank of America is saying about these potential account closures?
Well, they've indicated that they might be closing accounts that aren't meeting certain activity requirements.
Hmm.
And I think what's maybe most noteworthy is that they said that they might end up transferring those funds to the state.
Okay. So it's not even just that they would close the account, it's that the money would go to the state.
That's right.
Is this a Bank of America thing, or is this like a broader thing that you and I should be aware of in the financial world?
That's a really good question. I mean, Bank of America is the one that's been kind of making headlines lately, but this is pretty standard across a lot of financial institutions. So, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, lots of other banks have similar policies in place. And they're often tied to state laws around something called escheatment, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Okay, so Bank of America is just the one in the news,
Yeah.
but this is kind of an industry-wide thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So why are banks doing this? Like, what is the point of closing these accounts and potentially giving the money to the state?
Well, it really comes down to kind of this intersection of inactivity in the account and then these escheatment laws. And so when an account goes for a long period of time without any activity that's initiated by the customer, and that's an important distinction there, that it has to be customer initiated, it can be classified as either abandoned or dormant.
Okay.
And typically the kind of time frame we're talking about is 3 years or more.
Okay.
But some states like Florida and Washington have much shorter periods,
Yep.
sometimes as little as 12 months. So just a year of no activity and your account could be flagged.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
even if I have money in an account and I just don't use it,
Hmm.
that could be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where this term escheatment comes in.
Okay.
And so this is the legal obligation that banks have to report and transfer those abandoned or unclaimed funds to the appropriate state agency. So the state kind of becomes this custodian. They're holding these assets for the potential owners. So it's not just the bank choosing to do this. They're legally required to do this.
Got it.
And each state has its own specific laws that define what constitutes inactivity and when exactly those funds have to be transferred. And so, Bank of America, for example, states on their website that accounts inactive for an extended period, typically 3 years or more, may be considered abandoned and turned over to the state.
Okay. So legally they have to do this.
Mm.
But are there also kind of reasons why like Bank of America might just not want to have a lot of these inactive accounts just sitting on their books?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are some, risks and administrative burdens associated with maintaining a bunch of inactive accounts.
Okay.
They still have to maintain records. They may have to send statements. They have to comply with various regulations for all these accounts, even the inactive ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so by identifying these accounts and going through this escheatment process, transferring the funds where they're legally required to, they can kind of streamline their operations and potentially reduce some of those ongoing administrative costs. So it's kind of a way for them to manage their resources better.
Okay. So we've been talking about accounts,
Hmm.
but like when we say accounts, are we just talking about like checking and savings accounts, or are we talking about other stuff too?
No, it's not just checking and savings. It's actually a whole range of financial products.
Really?
So IRAs, those can be subject to these rules if there's no activity for a certain period of time.
Wow.
CDs, those are also included, and even the contents of safe deposit boxes, if the rental fees aren't paid and the owner's not, contacted or doesn't respond, those can eventually be turned over through escheatment processes.
Wow.
And then also things like uncashed cashier's checks or other, official bank issued items that haven't been deposited or cashed. Those can fall under these regulations too. And even securities like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, held in brokerage accounts with the bank.
Okay.
Those are not immune to these inactivity rules.
So it's really like anything that you have at a bank could potentially be
Pretty much.
subject to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say, I forgot about this account that I have and it gets flagged as inactive. What happens then?
Well, typically what will happen first is the bank will send out a notification, usually a letter to the last known address on file for the account holder. And that letter will basically inform you, hey, your account's been identified as abandoned due to lack of activity, and we might be cheating it. So that's why it's really important to keep your contact info updated with your bank.
Okay. And what if I don't get that letter?
Yeah.
Or I do get it, And I just, like, don't do anything.
Yeah, so if the bank doesn't hear back from you,
Right.
or you don't take any action to kind of reactivate the account within a certain time frame after that notification,
Mm-hmm.
then they're legally required to transfer those funds to the state's unclaimed property division.
Okay.
And once that happens, the bank account itself is usually closed, so you no longer have that account with those funds.
So my money is with the state. The account is closed, and I'm just out of luck.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you can still get your money back,
Okay.
but now it involves going through the state's unclaimed property division.
Okay.
And each state has its own process for filing a claim, and it can be a little bit involved. And it can take some time. You typically need to provide some documentation to prove your identity and that you're the owner of those funds. So things like ID, old account statements, that kind of stuff.
Oh, so that's a hassle.
Yeah. It's not the easiest process.
Yeah. Okay. So what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen?
Well, luckily, there are a bunch of pretty easy things you can do to keep your accounts active
Right.
and avoid this whole situation. So one of the most basic things is just to make regular transactions in your checking and savings accounts.
Okay.
So even small deposits or withdrawals at regular intervals just to show some activity in the account.
Okay.
It's important to note, though, that bank-initiated fees, things like monthly maintenance fees, those don't count as customer-initiated activity.
Okay.
So it has to be you doing something.
Got it. So I can't just be like, well, they're taking a fee out every month, so.
Right, that doesn't count.
Okay.
So you have to actually make a transaction yourself.
So like transferring money between accounts, that would count.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good one. Another thing is to just check your balances frequently and review your account activity.
Okay.
You know, this is easy these days with mobile banking apps.
Yeah.
And a lot of times just logging in can be enough to register as activity. So
Right.
it's a good habit to get into anyway.
Yeah. Just check it once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure everything looks right.
Okay.
Another thing is just keeping your personal information updated with the bank.
Right.
So making sure your address, your phone number, your email, all that stuff is up to date.
Okay.
Banks may also ask you to review and update other personal details like income or marital status every once in a while.
Okay.
If you get checks or other financial documents, make sure to cash or deposit them, before they expire.
Right.
Setting up direct deposits or recurring payments is another good way to just make sure there's some regular activity happening.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And then finally, a lot of banks offer different digital banking tools these days
Mm-hmm.
that let you set up alerts and kind of monitor the status of your accounts. So taking advantage of those features can help you stay informed and make sure nothing's getting flagged as inactive.
So it sounds like the takeaway here is just stay engaged with your accounts.
Exactly.
If you do something every once in a while, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even if it's just logging in and checking your balance,
Okay.
that's better than nothing.
So, the idea that your money could go to the state and then you'd have to go through this process to get it back,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a fun thought.
No, not at all.
So better to just, stay on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just about being proactive and keeping track of all your financial accounts,
Right.
even the ones you don't use all the time. It might be a good idea to go check any accounts that you haven't looked at in a while. Just make sure everything's still active.
Okay.
Make sure your contact info is up to date.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So this has been really, really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of times people don't think about these things
Right.
until it's too late. So it's great to get this information out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe even, go check your state's unclaimed property website just in case.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You never know what you might find.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, stay engaged with those accounts, and we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good.
Very
Take
soon.
care. Bye.